It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now this morning. We are going to cover a broad swath of our national issues this morning, but I got to tell you, it's going to be an interesting day. Thanks for joining with us. If you're joining us live on our website, great to have you out there at americasvoicenow.org. See a ton of you out there in Muncie, Baltimore, of course, folks out here in West Plains in our home area, Clarksville. I see Mission Viejo. I see Florida out there, Upper Midwest. I see Seattle out there, Spokane, Lakewood. I see Maine out there. Glad to have you all. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit with us before on our website, please feel free to do that. It's americasvoicenow.org. Our broadcast also plays on radio on 99.3, Big Country 99, in the heart of the Ozarks, broadcasting out of Houston, Missouri. Covers a broad swath of area. You can find them at 99.3 on your FM dial if you're in the broadcast area. In addition to that, we broadcast out on Patriot FB, on Patriot FB Radio. FB as in Facebook or Foxtrot Bravo, depending upon your military experience. And then, of course, we also cooperate with a bunch of other websites that carry our information and our podcasting and so forth, including the Constitution Club. I encourage you to join with the Constitution Club and Patriot FB. Also the CAN network. You know, the Constitution Club has an interesting project where they've got a group of mini websites set up for every county in the country. And so by joining the constitutionclub.ning.com, you are able to essentially find a localized website for your county. And if you're the first to sign up, great. There's 3,300 counties in the country, folks. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things this morning, and not the least of which is there's breaking news out there about the Bundys filing a lawsuit. And this is going to be handled by Larry Klayman. Larry Klayman, if you're not familiar with him, or you probably have heard his name, but you can't quite put a finger on where you've heard him. Larry Klayman was the guy who filed the NSA lawsuit about the violation of our Fourth Amendment rights for privacy. And there are 7 specific issues that they're going to be looking at in regard to this. We're going to go over those in just a moment. This is breaking news, and we're glad to bring it to you ASAP this morning. Our secondary topic this morning will be a broadcast from Judge Napolitano that was done on Hannity's program. And I got to tell you, for the first time, I've actually heard the words that all federal land ownership is unconstitutional. The first time I've heard that in the mainstream media. The Ministry of Propaganda is famous for only giving you the parts of a story or the information they want you to hear. And in this case, Hannity came through, and Judge Napolitano called it exactly like it was. He was discussing, or they were discussing in this particular segment, the outrageous eminent domain cases that have been exposed over time. And towards the tail end of it, and I'm going to let you hear the entire 10-minute segment, so you're going to have to just look at my face if you're watching on video, or if you listen on podcast, I'll give you some volume on it. For the first time, Napolitano came right out and called it, and he nailed it right on the head. He said all federal land ownership is unconstitutional because there is no provision in the Constitution for the federal government to own the vast swaths of land that they own under national parks and Bureau of Land Management and USDA and all these other various unconstitutional, unelected, unaccountable, 3-letter curse words. I mean, government administrative agencies. By the way, for the record, I'm more offended by a 3-letter agency than I am by a 4-letter curse word. I'm not one of those people that gets all bent. In fact, my language is, off air is probably not as good as it ought to be. But, when I hear a 3-letter agency, I cringe, and it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. Because to me, that is a far more offensive phrase or term than any kind of curse word you can come up with. I've heard all of those. But and they don't turn my stomach like the 3-letter agencies do. Our third topic is going to be a groundbreaking this is going to be a globe-rocking story, but it's interesting that it is only being published here on the Daily Mail UK. And it's basically the Citizens Commission on Benghazi has come right out, and this is a group, an independent group. We're going to get into the heavy details of it because it's very important, that Benghazi was not only preventable, but that it was an open act of treason because the White House, the Department of State, and perhaps even as far as Congress, and definitely the Pentagon, knew that it was about a $500 million weapon deal that went to the hands of al-Qaeda. And they knew it. That was aiding and abetting the enemy, and it is an act of treason. Boom. Now, they're calling for an open commission, a special commission that will review and have subpoena power to subpoena these individuals that were involved in this. And they made this announcement the other day at the National Press Club. We're going to talk about it. It is a very, very, very powerful segment, so do not miss it. Our fourth topic, the Louisiana government is creating a citizen database of people who are a risk to the state. You're kidding, right? No, I'm not. They are actually creating a database of people that they classify as a risk to the state. And down the road, they want to detect fraud. That was the original premise for the creation of this database. And to identify people who are a risk to the state down the road based upon the information we know about the individual. An individual who is going to be at risk of incarceration down the road. And I got to tell you, folks, this is exactly the fear that I've been talking about with the NSA databases that are being built. If the state of Louisiana can do this, you can imagine what the federal government is doing. And this is the core and the crux of the main core databases that are being built. That and every, the folks over there at the Bundy Ranch, they came out with an article the other day that the militia is fearing infiltration by feds at the Bundy Ranch. And they should be, because I guarantee you that the federal agents are all over not only that particular incident and that issue, but every militia in the nation, every small organization, every group, they're infiltrating everywhere. And they are definitely building enemy lists, and you are likely on them. Let's break this first story this morning on a Bundy Ranch. I received a press release the other day, and Attorney Larry Klayman, working closely with the Bundy family, will announce to the world what future action will be taken in the now infamous BLM standoff at the Bundy Ranch. They are exploring their legal options, including lawsuits and the legal remedies available to the Bundy family on behalf of we the American people. Their questions are basically 7. Was Sheriff Gillespie grossly negligent, or at least negligent in a reckless way during the Bundy standoff? Was Sheriff Douglas Gillespie in violation of his oath of office, and did he violate the trust of the people who voted him in office? Did Sheriff Gillespie put lives in danger as a result of his alleged gross negligence and unconstitutional conduct? The second topic, was Special Agent Daniel Love grossly negligent, or at least negligent in a reckless way during the time leading up to as well as the Bundy Ranch standoff? Did Daniel P. Love, Special Agent in charge, he's also, by the way, an ex-Spec Ops guy, informed Gillespie that the BLM was going to stand down, release the cattle and the land which he had unconstitutionally seized under the authority of a fraudulently obtained court order? Did Daniel Love evade and impede a law enforcement investigation initiated by local residents in Bunkerville, Nevada, when they had reason to believe the BLM was allegedly killing cattle and maliciously destroying private property owned by the Bundy family? 3. Did Daniel Love personally benefit from issuing no-bid contracts to Utah cattlemen who were hired by the BLM for the specific purpose of stealing cattle from the Bundy family? 4, is the BLM a private corporation or a government agency? If the BLM is a privately held organization, do they have the power of arrest or to use deadly force or the use of AR-15s and other lethal weapons against peaceful American citizens? 5, can the U.S. government be restrained or can an injunction be obtained prohibiting them from taking any further action against the American people, particularly the Bundys, before a complete and thorough investigation is completed? 6, can a formal legal investigation be conducted to review possible evidence and to hold Sheriff Douglas Gillespie and Daniel Love legally accountable, as well as and others who may have committed crimes and violated their oaths of office? If so, can citizens make arrests once indictments have been issued and served? And then 7, should Harry Reid and his son Rory be investigated and tried under the Racketeering Influence and Corruption Act, or RICO? Are the threats from Harry Reid and his son related to their possible attempts to profit from removing the Bundys from the disputed land? And does this rise to the level of civil RICO liability? They're addressing these questions to the local legislative groups out there, their representatives, after they met with Larry Klayman and Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore, who I played you, or I posted a video up with her the other day talking on MSLSD, in which she blew that knucklehead out of the water who was trying to demonize the folks over there. The issue here is that Klayman, and if you're not familiar with him, he was the guy, again, he's the former chairman of Judicial Watch, which is a public interest and a nonprofit law firm, and they were the ones who filed the latest the NSA lawsuit against Fourth Amendment violations, which I believe is still wending its way through the courts. He's also created the organization called Freedom Watch, which protects civil liberties and rights of all persons, whatever their ethnicity, race, religion, sex, or otherwise. And he's also written a number of books. Excuse me. Klayman is also representing the families of Navy SEAL Team 6 and where their helicopter was shot down. And Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore represents Clark County Assembly District 4, and this, of course, is her legislative area. So basically what this comes down to is that they are claiming here that they have been deemed as domestic terrorists in a statement by Senate Leader Harry Reid. And what exactly does that mean? Well, according to the Patriot Act, in Section 802 of the U.S. Patriot Act, they expanded in that act the definition of patriotism to cover domestic as well as international terrorism. Quote, and they define it as such: a person engages in domestic terrorism if they do an act, quote, dangerous to human life, that is a violation of the criminal laws of a state or the United States, if the act appears intended to, 1, intimidate or coerce a civilian population. That would put the BLM, as based on their definition, guilty of domestic terrorism, ladies and gentlemen. The second would be if the act appears intended to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or 3, to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. Additionally, the acts have to occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, and if they do not, they may be regarded as international terrorism. Now, let's take this one step further. Under the National Defense Authorization Act, you can be grabbed and picked up as a indeterminate detainee for an indefinite period of time based on a belligerent act. Would the Bundy Ranch issues be construed to be a belligerent act? We don't know. And the reason we don't know is because under the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, when you're picked up, you are prohibited from having a habeas corpus hearing or having access to legal counsel. So you can actually never get in front of a court to say, Your Honor, please define for me what act I committed that was belligerent and define what constitutes a belligerent act so that the world can understand, 1, what can we be held accountable for? In other words, you don't even know what a belligerent act is. Is it spitting on a sidewalk or is it slapping a senator? Is it standing there in a protest zone and refusing to stand inside the boundaries of a free speech zone, a First Amendment box? We don't know. The Bundy family secretary has put together a list of questions. Who had the guns pointed at whom? In other words, would that be an act of domestic terrorism based on the fact that the BLM had 200 officers there who were fully armed and utilizing those weapons, pointing them at civilians? If so, and of course, doesn't that immediately qualify as an act under the Patriot Act to intimidate or coerce a civilian population? Absolutely it does. Just because the act is by government should not disqualify it from being construed as domestic terrorism. I mean, let's be honest. Is that not the case? Now, they also ask about kidnapping because the third point in the definition of the USA Patriot Act is an act that appears to be intended to, to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. Well, the question was, the son David was arrested and taken to jail overnight. He was beaten up, and he was dirty, and he'd been injured. Then he was taken to a federal court to see a judge. But after a few hours of waiting to see the judge, suddenly they came into the room, handed him 2 citations, unchained him, and released him through the door. Kicked him out. So was that considered, or could that be construed as an act of kidnapping? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an attorney. To be frank with you, I'm certainly not qualified to answer that question. But the real point here, folks, is that what we have to do is begin to use the definitions that the courts themselves and their own laws, which have been passed, quite frankly, unconstitutionally, should be utilized against them. The truth of the matter is, what we're seeing here are not only blatant belligerent acts, but acts of open treason against Americans. Because when you are sitting there and you are pointing weapons at Americans over a debt, a financial debt, and you're intimidating people and threatening prison time, that's debtor's prison. We fought a revolutionary war over that. The truth of the matter is, what we have is a federal government that is completely, totally, and utterly out of control. And it's not limited just to the BLM. It's not limited to the National Park Service. It's not limited to the USDA. By the way, the FCC is coming out with net neutrality all over again. It's not limited to the EPA. It's there. The list, ladies and gentlemen, is as long as the list of the unconstitutional administrative agencies that exist. They have no constitutional authority to exist. Nowhere ever did we give, and I'd love to have Judge Napolitano and I have a discussion about this, because nowhere did we ever grant a power of attorney to Congress that said you can subdelegate this power of attorney to other unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who, number one, never take an oath of office, and number two, don't have any accountability to we the people. We can't choose them, we can't elect them or unelect them. And therefore, they have placed us in a position in which they have breached our trust and breached our contract. The contract was, we give you limited power of attorney to act on our behalf, but only to act on our behalf, never to act against our best interest. Any attorney can look at that. A first-year pre-law student can look at that and say, Congress has blatantly, openly, and aggressively violated the basic tenets of jurisprudence. End of argument, ladies and gentlemen. Now, you'll never get a court to honor that. Why? Well, the simple truth is the courts work for the same government that is betraying you. The courts work for the same government that is unconstitutionally stripping you every day of your First Amendment right to redress your grievances with your government, to your free speech rights, to your ability to worship in the way and manner in which you choose, your Second Amendment right to defend yourself, to protect yourself and your family, and, frankly, to defend your nation against the tyranny that they represent. Your Third Amendment right. Now, and a lot of people, by the way, don't realize how deep the Third Amendment goes. We really need to have an entire program on that. Your Fourth Amendment right against unlawful search and seizure and the violation of your privacy, which is inherent. The word privacy never appears, but it is inherent. Your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. How do I know that? Everybody who's visited the Obamacare website and was forced to sign up in that manner was forced to give up their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, because hidden in the code, secretly hidden in the code, was the phrase that states that by the use of this system, you're acknowledging that your information and anything that you submit to the federal government can be used for investigation, audit purposes, and prosecution. So you are forced by one law to waive your Fifth Amendment right and your Fourth Amendment right to your privacy and against unlawful search and seizure. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this is the pattern that we have taken. Your Sixth Amendment right for a jury trial by your peers. Go to any administrative agency, and you have no jury trial by your peers. You are simply heard by a judge who happens to work for the agency, and lo and behold, amazingly enough, virtually every time they find on behalf of the agency. Isn't that stunning? You see, the point here, ladies and gentlemen, is that our rights have been stripped away from us. And let's not forget our 10th Amendment right, which is not only a right inherent to the individual people of the country, and to we, the people, the consent of the governed, but also your states themselves as entities and the guaranteed Republican form of government that was given to every state as a limit against federal overreach. Now, it was given to each state by themselves, or reserved, I should say, is probably a better phrase. Each state reserved in the 10th Amendment the right to withdraw from the federal government the ability for them to impact those states, because it says anything not delineated specifically in this Constitution by the states to the federal government and by the people is reserved to the states or respectively to the people themselves. So the states themselves, all 50 of them, have the right to stand up and say, we are entities just like individuals, and our rights have been usurped. Now, they've been bribed into waiving their right. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an act of treason as well. The problem is that we have a federal government that needs to be completely stripped and disbanded and rebuilt from the ground up. And nothing short of that will do. Every member, every participant, every agency, every employee, every judge, every member of Congress, every administrative agency person, every administration person, whether they are cabinet members all the way down to all of the committees that participate, all need to be removed, labeled dishonorably discharged, permanently barred and prohibited from ever having access to politics again, and then we begin over again. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Judge Andrew Napolitano and his blatant open statement. All federal land ownership is unconstitutional, and there is no authority within the Constitution for the federal government to own and possess land outside of some very, very exclusive and limited areas for forts, magazines, and outside of the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. itself, which is ceded to the federal government. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing else. No land ownership. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Communicate with me directly by email at mike@americasvoicenow.org. Share our videos, and please, if you can visit our website and donate to us, we'd be very grateful. Hang on a second. We'll be right back. Hey, folks, I get an email from people once in a while that's like, man, that dude is too intense. I'm sorry. It is true, I am. And I don't deny it, because I'm passionate about the fact that our nation is being stolen from us while we sit here and watch the thieves in masks with evil intent and machinations from the pit of hell And we sit here and we watch them squander and steal and connive and through scurrilous and skullduggery and actions that are representative of the most heinous crimes against humanity and against their own citizenry, destroy this country. Ladies and gentlemen, it is everywhere. There is no place in our nation where federal government and state governments have not betrayed us. Your state governments, if they're anything like mine, are absolutely worthless. They're worthless as teats on a bull. That's the truth. They are absolutely worthless to us. They are interested only in politics and their own personal gain. They are interested in power. They are interested in money. They are interested in your degradation for their improvement, their gain. They go into politics for all the wrong reasons. They never pass laws that benefit you. Every one they pass, and you know, I was talking to a fellow yesterday, Bob Parker, and Bob and I are old friends. Bob is a guy who ran for Congress here, and the political Republican machine destroyed him in an attempt to try to make sure that they got their guy into office, somebody they could control, and they accomplished that. The truth is, you know, we were talking about our House and our Senate here in the state of Missouri and how we've been trying to get some legislation passed for a number of things, including not the least of which is to remove the Morpho Trust, get the state of Missouri out of a contract with Morpho Trust. This is the company who has the database on every driver's license holder in the state. Shares it with third world countries and third party countries, as well as federal government in violation of state law. And one of the representatives, you know, put forth a bill that was, you know, kind of rough to begin with, and never talked about it, never sent out an email to garner support for it, didn't really, but he put it up there so that he could say, hey, look what I did. But the truth is, the thing was never advanced. No one ever talked about it. It was never really promoted properly. You couldn't even find it in the legislative roster. And then the thing got chopped up and sliced up and diced up and watered down to the point where it was worthless, and no wonder it didn't pass, and frankly, thank God it didn't. You see, here's the problem. Politicians accede to our pressure, but only to the extent that they create a bill which they know they'll never get passed, and they make a token effort to accomplish something, and then at the end of the day, either they destroy it, they self-destroy it, or they allow their compatriots to destroy it. And ultimately, the only thing that Congress and on the federal side and their state assemblies do is they continue to pass more laws. Let me tell you something. Your job, whoever you are in Congress or state assemblies, your state senates, your state houses, your job is not to pass more laws. We don't need more laws. We've got so many flipping laws on the books, ladies and gentlemen, that if everybody listening to this program right now stood on each other's shoulders, we wouldn't be able to reach the top of the pile. We don't need more laws. We need a whole lot less laws. The only laws that need to be passed are those that limit them. I got to tell you, I listened to an interview last night with Judge Andrew Napolitano on Hannity, and they were talking about these outrageous eminent domain cases. I want you to hear this entire segment. It's about 10 minutes. So, you're going to have to just look at my ugly mug because I'm going to listen and watch with you. You can't watch it on our stream. I'm sorry. I don't have the software to be able to stream it and catch two images simultaneously. But if anybody wants to donate the $400 it's going to cost for us to get that software, please do, because I'm dying and I can't afford it myself. You can do that by going to our PayPal website and using our PayPal link. It's $400. That's what the software costs. We don't have the money. I can't afford to put it out of my pocket anymore. And if you can make that gift to this program, not only will you benefit, but so will everybody else out there. It's $400. We don't have it. Anyway, the point with this particular discussion was Napolitano was talking about the unconstitutionality of eminent domain and how it's been abused. And I want you to hear the entire episode because it's very, very telling.
Absolutely wild. Now, let me explain. Now, for weeks, we've been covering the story about rancher Cliven Bundy in Nevada and how armed federal agents and snipers began impounding his cattle, all because they were grazing on public land and eating public grass. Now, last night on this program, we also introduced you to Seal and Andy Barry. Now, they're a couple who lost their dream cabin in Colorado simply because the government decided it wanted their land. Why did they?
By the way, I'm going to interrupt this a couple of times during the course of it because I want you to hear the key points, and this is part of our critical analysis of this. They're talking here, and I want you to notice when they talk about open space with this couple in Colorado, this is about turning property back into wildlands. And you'll note that this stuff is all predicated upon the upon the Agenda 21 principles of turning the western states into these vast wilderness areas where humans are prohibited from having any access or contact, and all of it, you know, the nation has turned back into a habitat for wildlife. Which, listen, I like wildlife too, but I'm not going to sit here and turn the entire country into a gigantic zoo. Okay, not for some radical environmentalist extremist who's, quite frankly, an eco-terrorist and a domestic terrorist against the humanity in this nation. That's unacceptable.
Want their land for, quote, open space. Now, the couple tried to fight for it, but they told me it was pointless and that they ultimately had to give up their dream cabin for just a fraction of what they paid for this. Watch this.
They originally offered $30,000, and we were able to get $115,000, but we had almost $80,000 in legal bills.
$80,000 in legal bills, but you paid $550,000 for the whole thing, right?
We get to keep part of it, but the 10-acre parcel that they're taking, we finally felt like we just had to, when their price came up to enough to cover our attorney fees, we had to take it. We have 2 kids in college. We couldn't keep fighting.
All for open.
You see, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. What this is financial attrition. The federal government has absolutely unlimited resources, bought and paid for blood money that they've stolen from you, and they're buying and paying attorneys to do nothing but file briefs against these people all day long. You, on the other hand, are required to have legal counsel to go fight against an unconstitutional, unethical system, which your hearing is heard by a judge who, frankly, has works for the agency itself that is persecuting you, and you have no way to actually ever win because you cannot afford the financial the battle. You can't afford to pay the attorneys endlessly. And those attorneys that they have are on staff. Those people are getting paid a salary whether they're sitting there drawing cartoons or drafting legal briefs. And I have to tell you, having been through the federal system, most of the time, their briefs don't even make sense. They just throw a bunch of crap on paper and they shove it in front of the court. They make the most outrageous, unethical, illegal, immoral claims. They tie cases to it that don't have any relevance. I've seen it firsthand. I fought against it. I won against it. I personally took my case, or one aspect of my case, all the way to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, one rung short of the Supreme Court, and I won on 2 points. I filed on 2, and I won on 2. I did it myself, but I got to tell you, folks, it took me 6 years. The filings that came out of the Attorney General's office were unbelievable. I mean, you have no idea. They made the most outrageous claims, and they introduced cases as case law precedent that weren't even relevant to the case. They twisted the case, the case precedent statement, saying, "Well, this represents this, and so therefore that applies over here." And it wasn't even relevant. I mean, a first-year law student could have picked holes in their case. It's not. It's just a flurry of paper. But you have to respond to every one, and your attorney is sitting there getting paid $100, $200, $300, $400, $500 an hour. It's unbelievable. It's unconscionable. It is the highest form of betrayal. Listen to this story as we go.
in space. Now, their story is just heartbreaking. And now there's a situation tonight in Texas involving the Bureau of Land Management. Now, this is about to get very, very messy. Now, the Texas Attorney General, Greg Abbott, who'll probably be the next governor, wrote in a scathing letter to the BLM director, remember Harry Reid's good buddy Neil Cornsey, that he is deeply concerned that his agency could seize a 116-mile stretch of land along the Red River. Now, Abbott wrote, quote, "As Attorney General of Texas, I am deeply troubled by reports from BLM field hearings that the federal government may claim for the first time that 90,000 acres of territory along the Red River now belong to the federal government." He wrote, "Private landowners in Texas have owned, maintained, and cultivated this land for generations. Now, despite the long-settled expectations of these hardworking Texans along the Red River, the BLM appears to be threatening their private property rights by claiming ownership over this territory." Now, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more that we'll hear about this story in the days to come. But here's what we all need to keep in mind. This is not new. For years, right here on this program, we've been exposing government overreach and eminent domain abuses. For example, let's take it back to 2006. Right here on this show, we introduced you to Lou Anzalone. Now, he's a World War II vet. He was being kicked out of his home after living in that home 46 years. Take a look.
I lived in here since the first time I bought it. I renovated, I winterized it, I did it, and I will bless this house. Because I'm able to be 89 years old.
Thank God.
And my wife is 89. Now the city decides that this is a nice place for someone else. So they're throwing us out.
By the way, this was not for a road, a school, or a hospital either. Now, we also met a great-grandmother by the name of Norma Peterson Fluke in 2005. She was also going through government gone wild in a similar situation. Take a look.
Family has lived here 65 years. The business has been here 56 years. And now the town has come and deemed us unfit to be in this town and want to put us somewhere else. But we're centrally located for our business. And without this property, we would go out of business.
Just pathetic. And then there was this heartbreaking story of World War II vet Johnny Stevens. Now, back in 2005, doctors told him that he had lung cancer. He was given only 2 years to live. And while he wanted to spend his last days peacefully in his home, well, the government, they wanted his house. Why? To build luxury condos and townhouses. Why? So they could get more tax revenue. Look at this case.
I don't have too much time now. But I had intended to live out the rest of my life in that little house I got, tend my garden, and live in peace. As it stands right now, I don't know where I'm going or what I'm going to do.
Just sad and very pathetic. This is your government gone wild. These are American citizens, some heroes, and they're fighting their last days on this earth, fighting for the property they've lived in for decades. Now, unfortunately, we can go on for hours with similar stories that we've done, but tonight we're looking for a solution to this mess, and here to help do just that is Fox News senior judicial analyst, our friend Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, welcome back.
It's nice to be with you, Sean. No matter what horrors we're talking about, it's nice to be with you.
No, I appreciate it, but you know, this couple that I interviewed last night from Colorado, Cliven Bundy, whether you agree he owes the money, doesn't owe the money, why is the government treating its citizens this way when there's a simple answer that you brought up on this very program in the Cliven Bundy case?
The simple answer for the government against Cliven Bundy is to take the judgment that a federal judge has determined the Bundys owe the government and file that judgment in the local county courthouse. And then when Mr. Bundy passes away, before the property passes to his inheritors, the government will get its judgment plus interest. Or if Mr. Bundy, before he passes away, sells the property, the government will get its judgment plus interest. Now, your question is a profound one. Why won't the government do that? Why, instead of doing that, have we seen this massive show of force with sharpshooters and snipers, with some guns aimed at Mr. Bundy, at his family, at innocent protesters and friends, even at the news media? Because the government, instead of using the least force necessary, which is what the rule of law is using the most force possible because they want to intimidate the Bundys. I'm convinced he cannot be intimidated. They want to intimidate others, and they're probably a little unsure of themselves, Sean. And so they're compensating for that lack of surety of certainty with this massive Stalinistic-like use of force. 200
plus armed agents, as you say, sharpshooters and snipers here. We've got dead cattle as a result of all of this. Dogs were used, and then we had people hit with stun guns by some of the BLM officers there. I didn't want to see the officers hurt. I didn't want to see the protesters hurt, and it seemed all for nothing. But this isn't an isolated case. We did a whole series on eminent domain, some of which we highlighted here tonight.
Right.
The government is taking property from people in Colorado because they want open space. They're taking property that a World War II vet has lived in for 46 years so they can get more tax revenue for townhouses and condos. Really? Is that what the law says about eminent domain? I thought it was for schools and roads and hospitals.
Unfortunately, the law has changed, and it has changed in a totalitarian direction. Let me take you back to the framing of the Constitution. When the Constitution was written, Jefferson and Madison argued the government should not have eminent domain powers.
Did you hear that, folks? Jefferson and Madison both argued that there should be no eminent domain power associated with the federal government. And yet, the Supreme Court has changed all that as late as in the 80s when they passed the original the original version of eminent domain that says that a city can take your property just because they can determine a better use for it than you're putting it to. So recognize what's happened here. We are living under a constitution that is completely ignored, under a shadow government that truly does not exist or have constitutional authority to exist. Listen in and understand exactly what he's saying. I want you to listen carefully now because this is the heart of what I wanted to get to. And this is very, very important stuff. Make sure that you're listening as carefully as you possibly can.
Get back to the framing of the Constitution. When the Constitution was written, Jefferson and Madison argued the government should not have eminent domain powers, that the only moral legitimate transfer of real estate was that which was voluntary on both sides, a willing buyer and a willing seller. When the government takes your property against your will, no matter what they pay you for it, it is not a willing seller, it's just a willing buyer, the government. And often the government gets the property at a bargain basement rate.
That's outrageous.
However, before the Kelo decision of about 10 years ago, Sean, the government more or less, not exclusively, but for the most part, used property that it took for roads or schools or hospitals, legitimate public purposes where every human being could enjoy the new purpose of the land.
And they were duly compensated in those cases. They got fair market value or maybe a little above fair market value. Wasn't that the standard back then?
Yes.
All right, let me ask you this, because we have this case now in Texas, and we're going to get into it in the next segment as well, but where the BLM is now claiming this property on the Red River. They're going to just take those take that acreage?
The BLM made the colossal mistake of going on the wrong side of that river. You and I know Greg Abbott. Even if he were not about to become the Republican nominee for governor of Texas, and he'll make a terrific governor.
Agreed.
He is the tenacious defender of personal liberty and property rights as the sitting Attorney General of Texas. You will see a vastly different reaction in Texas than you saw in Nevada. Right. In Nevada, you saw lip service from a governor who sided with Bundy. In Texas, you will see legal action and maybe even force from a state government that simply will not permit the feds to steal the private property of its citizens.
Texas is not going to give up without that fight there. And why would the government precipitate that when it's not their land? Last question. Let me put up on the screen, Judge. If you look at the latest percentage of land that is owned by the federal government as of 2010.
Here it comes, folks. I want you to listen to Napolitano's statement at the end here.
81%, Utah 66, Idaho 61, Oregon 53. And you go right on down the list. Why does the government own all of this land anyway?
Sean, I'm going to make a statement that the government will consider outrageous, but almost everybody, Pete, watching us now will understand it, and I expect you'll appreciate it. The Constitution simply does not authorize the federal government to own any of this land. All of it is being held unconstitutionally, and all of it should be returned to the private property owners from which it was taken or to the states in whose borders it exists. Period.
I totally agree with you. And not only that, they can't afford to manage it anyway. You know, when you think of the Bundy situation, it's about, Cliven Bundy's cattle eating government grass and not paying for it, and then snipers and sharpshooters surround the ranch.
Amazingly enough,
the statement
folks,
that the government will consider outrageous, but almost everybody, Pete, watching us now will understand it, and I expect you'll appreciate it. The Constitution simply does not authorize the federal government to own any of this land. All of it is being held unconstitutionally, and all of it should be returned to the private property owners from which it was taken or to the states in whose borders it exists. Period.
I totally agree with you. And not.
See that, folks? The real truth here is that, you see, our nation is not under federal control. It is supposed to be. The federal government is supposed to be such a microcosmic aspect within our lives that we actually have to look with a microscope to find them. Ask yourself, is that where we are today? What we have is a government that is acting outside the boundaries of the Constitution in almost every respect, in everything they do. This issue about immigration, the failure to monitor our borders, the issues about Benghazi, the gun running, the Attorney General's office involved in the most scurrilous and betrayals of the oath of office and the conscience. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that shocks the conscience of the country. But here's the problem. You've been hammered by so much betrayal, by so much treason, that you don't even respond to it anymore. You've been shocked into acquiescence to it because, one, you don't know what to do. And I understand that. I mean, we sit and we make all the arguments that we can, and we find that none of those arguments make sense, and none of those arguments are ever listened to. And that reinforces the statement I made to you the other day about that new Princeton and Northwestern study that declares that the U.S. government is now an oligarchy and that it no longer represents the population, that it represents the corporatocracy and the oligarchy of industry and business and government itself. That's it. They no longer represent any aspect of we the people anymore, and they haven't in a very, very long time. That study, and listen, Northwestern and Princeton are, bastions of liberal thought. And for them to come out and say that that as a result of where we stand today, that the central point emerges from our research is that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while mass-based interest groups and average citizens have little or no independent influence. You see, the problem is that we have lost our country. We've lost complete and utter control of it. And I'm going to tell you something. When this has to be taken back, we've allowed it to go so far that we're never going to be able to do it again with the ballot box. I'm just telling you the realities of it. You may not agree. We all want to try to do it lawfully. We all want to try to do it peacefully. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to happen. That's it. It's not. You're not going to be able to take this country back because the people who have to pass the laws that you're complaining about are the same people who wrote them and benefit from them. And that's the end of the story. Everything after that is propaganda, marketing, and lies. That's the long and the short of it, folks. And we can't, we can try to call it something it's not, but it isn't going to matter. It's not going to change anything. You're listening to America's Voice. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to blow the lid off Benghazi because we're going to show you how the U.S. government knew Benghazi was about a $500 billion or $1 million gun running deal, that the United States willingly, knowingly gave weapons to al-qaeda, aided and abetted the enemy. An act of treason was committed. The White House knew about it. The Department of State knew about it. Hillary Clinton knew about it. The Pentagon knew about it. And most likely, all of Congress knew about it because they'd been briefed. Ladies and gentlemen, that alone should be enough for an uprising of American citizens to say, we are on strike and we will not do anything until all of you are out and vacated. Vamos, out, done, finished, dishonorably discharged, permanently barred and blocked from ever having access to politics again. All of you are fired. None of you are getting unemployment. And in fact, if you argue one single word, we will exile you from the continental United States. We'll be back in just a minute.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're about to blow the lid off of the Benghazi scandal and to show you how a group of independent individuals, all with extraordinarily high levels of provenance and access, and with very, very stunning careers in high up areas around in various aspects of the government, have been able to open up and expose what really happened in Benghazi and how the United States of America switched sides in the war on terror and committed an act of treason for Benghazi to occur. How the federal government, the White House, the Department of State, the Pentagon, and most likely everyone in Congress, but certainly small committee organizations, knew in advance and have guilty knowledge that we allowed a $500 million weapons cache to reach al-qaeda. We aided and abetted the enemy in an attempt to oust Muammar Gaddafi, and that was the cause of Benghazi. The Citizens Committee on Benghazi is an independent organization that has called themselves together to make sure that someone got to the bottom of this. Because clearly Congress has been, with all the kabuki theater we hear about it, nothing's actually ever done. And here's why. Their claim is that Congress knew all along. And they're never going to hold a wide open commission that is going to have subpoena power, because they don't dare do that, because it's going to come out in that discussion that they themselves had guilty knowledge of treason. Here's the members of the commission. These are no slouches, folks. And this isn't, Alex Jones or somebody else that you could say, that guy's crazy, or, he's some kind of a right-wing lunatic. Let me tell you who they are. Roger Aronoff, editor, Accuracy in Media. Larry Bailey, captain, U.S. Navy SEAL, retired. Colonel Dick Brower, Jr., U.S. Air Force, retired. Charles Jones, Brigadier General, U.S. Air Force, retired. Claire Lopez, former CIA operations officer. Admiral James Lyons, retired. Admiral. I mean, we're not talking about, some low-down, grunt. General Thomas McInerney, retired. Wayne Morris, Colonel, USMC, retired. Wayne Simmons, former CIA officer. General Paul Vallely, retired. Former Congressman and retired Army Colonel Alan West. There are others who are also members of the Citizens Commission on Benghazi. Now, there will be those who will say, well, wait a second, those are all right-wing, right-wing leaning or Tea Party people or any of that nonsense. You know what? These people took their own time and money and effort and energy and put together this Citizens Commission on Benghazi to study it and identify what Congress is unwilling to allow you to see. And their claims are very clear. Let me go through and by the way, you'll note that this is hitting the press, not in the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, Fox News, Communist News Network, MSLSD, NBC, CBS, ABC, but on the Daily Mail out of the UK. Why is that? Because the Ministry of Propaganda will be damned if you're ever going to hear about this if they have anything to say about it. They made their announcement at the National Press Club, where news happens, April 22nd in Washington. And the people who released the interim findings were Claire Lopez, retired Admiral Chuck Kubik, retired Admiral James Ace Lyons, retired former CIA officer Wayne Simmons, and civil rights attorney John Clark. Let me tell you what they found. After a 7-month review of the deadly terrorist attack in Benghazi, this was the following determination. Number one, it could have been prevented. If the U.S. had not been helping to arm al-Qaeda militias throughout Libya a year earlier. The United, quote, this is their quote now, not mine. Quote, the United States switched sides in the war on terror with what we did in Libya, knowingly facilitating the provision of weapons to known al-Qaeda militias and figures. End quote. Claire Lopez, member of the commission and a former CIA officer. She blames the administration, the Obama administration, for failing to stop half of a $1 billion United Arab Emirates arms shipment from reaching al-Qaeda-linked militants. Quote, again, this is Lopez again. Remember, those weapons that came into Benghazi were permitted to enter by our armed forces who were blockading the approaches from both air and sea. They were permitted to come in. They knew these weapons were coming in, and that was allowed. The intelligence community was part of it. The Department of State was part of it. And certainly that means that the top leadership of the United States, all of our national security leadership, and potentially even Congress, if they were briefed on this, also knew about this. The weapons, end quote, by the way, the weapons were intended for Gaddafi, but were allowed by the U.S. to flow to his Islamic opposition. In other words, the United Arab Emirates was shipping these weapons over to support their buddy Gaddafi, another oil king. What happened was we helped divert it to al-Qaeda, our sworn enemy since 9/11. Now, this happened in 2011, so 10 years after 9/11, 10 years post the murder of 3,000 Americans, we assisted, we aided, we abetted the enemy of the United States of America. And who was guilty? The White House, senior congressional members, Pentagon, Department of State, Hillary Clinton. Quote, the White House and senior congressional members deliberately and knowingly pursued a policy that provided material support to terrorist organizations in order to topple a ruler, Muammar Gaddafi, who had been working closely with the West actively to suppress al-Qaeda, end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, that is treason. An enemy aided and abetted by the United States itself, who was a sworn enemy of the nation. Some look at this as treason, says Wayne Simmons, a former CIA officer who participated in the commission's research. I don't think some look at it as treason. I think this is a clear and open. This should cause a stand-up world or United States-wide revolt. Every American should be on their feet, demanding every member of this government exit as dishonorably discharged. Retired Rear Admiral Chuck Kubik, another commission member. Here's what he told reporters Tuesday, that those weapons, all of them, are now in Syria. See, I broke this back right after the original the original event back in 2012. And I talked about the fact that this was a gun running deal that made Fast and Furious in the Arizona and Mexico border look like a couple of kids swapping spitball shooters out in the playground. Quote, this is Kubik. Gaddafi wasn't a good guy, but he was being marginalized. Gaddafi actually offered to abdicate his position of authority, his throne, shortly after the beginning of the 2011 rebellion. But the U.S. ignored his calls for a truce. This is the commission's statements. This is not Mike talking. These are the commissioners, and these people have access to not only all kinds of historical information, a lot of them are from the intelligence community, and they interviewed a lot of people that were on the ground there, witnesses that were involved, inside testimony from people within the Pentagon, the intelligence community, even the White House and federal government staff themselves. The U.S. government ignored his calls for a truce, the commission wrote, ultimately backing the horse that would later help kill a U.S. ambassador. Kubik said that the effort at truce talks fell apart when the White House declined to allow the Pentagon to pursue it seriously. Quote, we had a leader who had won the Nobel Peace Prize, said Kubik, but who has been unwilling to give peace a chance for 72 hours. In March 2011, Kubik says the U.S. African Commander General Carter told NBC News that the U.S. military was not actively targeting Muammar Gaddafi. That, Kubik revealed, was a signal to the Libyan dictator that there was a chance of a deal. Gaddafi responded, quote, by verifiably pulling his forces back from key al-Qaeda rebel-held cities such as Benghazi and Misrata. Well, guess what? Gaddafi wanted only two conditions to be met. One, that he had permission to keep fighting al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and the lifting of the sanctions that the United States had against him, his family, and those who were loyal to him. However, our president and this Obama administration betrayed America in an open aiding and abetting of the enemy and an act of treason. The Obama administration's unwillingness to help broker a peaceful exit for the Libyan strongman, quote, led to extensive loss of life, including 4 Americans, when al-Qaeda-linked militants attacked U.S. diplomatic facilities in the city of Benghazi. The White House and the National Security Staff will not respond to questions about the findings of this group. Quote, we don't claim to have all the answers here, says Roger Aronoff, whose group is Accuracy in Media. We hope you will please pursue this, he said to reporters. Check it out and challenge us. Now, where in Congress have you ever heard that phrase related to Benghazi? Where was Hillary Clinton saying, challenge my argument. If you think I'm wrong, prove me wrong. No, what she said to us is, what does it matter? The commission and Accuracy in Media filed 85 document requests under the Freedom of Information Act. And they hit the Department of Defense, Senate, State Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the CIA with demand after demand after demand for this documentation. Most of its information has come from insiders with deep knowledge of the flow of weapons in Libya and elsewhere in the African Maghreb. Admiral James Ace Lyons, who has been a long outspoken critic, I might add, about not only this, but also the SEAL Team 6 deaths associated to the helicopter crash and so forth. Here's what he had. He told the group that he believes the raid on the Benghazi compound was intended to be a kidnapping exercise. And I talked about this back when this first happened 2 years ago. It was a kidnapping exercise. Their intention was not to kill Chris Stevens, but to kidnap him and hold him for a prisoner swap for that blind sheikh son of a gun, Abdel Rahman. This is the guy who was guilty of the original bombing of the World Trade Center, and in addition to that, he was the mastermind who tried to blow up the United Nations, the Lincoln and Holland tunnels, the George Washington Bridge, and a federal building in New York. A senior FBI source told Lyons directly, and this is out of Lyons' mouth, he told me that was the plan. Lyons also said that the attack grew in intensity and resulted in the deaths of Stevens and 3 other U.S. personnel. He claims that it lacked the resource. He says that the claim that the U.S. government lacked a resource to mount a counterattack in time was false. Quote, "I'm going to tell you that's not true," said Admiral Lyons. We had a 130-man unit of forces at Sigonella Air Force Base in Italy, and they were ready to go. The flight time from Italy to Benghazi is roughly an hour. Now, I got to tell you, folks, this is an organization of individuals, and I got to tell you, most of them are older. Admiral Ace Lyons, he's probably, I don't know, in his mid-80s. The guy stands to, what are they going to do? Take away his pension? He doesn't have any reason to misrepresent the facts and to lie to the American people. He has been one of, we keep hearing about why won't people within the inside stand up and speak? Well, they do. They are right here. They are right here, right now. Simmons, a former CIA officer, criticized the Obama administration on the familiar refrain of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton examined in a Senate hearing where it mattered little why the Benghazi facilities were struck. He says they believed they were going to be saved, that they were going to be rescued, but they weren't. This is Simmons now speaking about the 4 Americans who were killed. I know who made the decision, in my heart of hearts, to leave our war fighters there and to be blown up, and then to have one of the most powerful politicians in our country sit there and say, what difference does it make? Should be an alarm bell for all Americans. It haunts me, said Simmons. I play that line over and over and over and over in my mind. The group is calling for a select congressional committee to investigate the Benghazi incident. Now, what you need to know is that when you have a select congressional committee, this is different than the committee that's currently, or the committees that have currently been hearing the Benghazi stuff. And here's why it matters. When you have a select congressional committee, they have the power, first of all, to utilize sweeping subpoena power to order people to come before and testify under oath. And that's the one thing we never keep getting. We never get anybody who testifies under oath. And then when you do, they're limited to 5 minutes from the congressman who's questioning them and all that crap. Where have you ever seen a trial where the prosecutor was told, you've only got 5 minutes to question that witness? Come on, ladies and gentlemen. You're never going to get to the truth that way. This needs to be the equivalent of a trial. And the only way to accomplish that is to have a select congressional committee that has subpoena and law enforcement power. Now, let me tell you something. Here's where you're going to see where Congress has guilty knowledge. They're never, ever going to do that. You know why? Because they knew. Maybe not every member of Congress, but there were plenty of people who had inside scoop knowledge that what was really happening was the United States of America was arming the open, declared enemy of the United States. There have been a total of 189 House members who have actually signed on to a bill that would create this committee. But guess what? They stuck it in front of John Boehner, and you know what he did? He blocked it. He blocked it. John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, stopped it. That tells me that Congress, or certain members of Congress, the upper echelon, the granddaddies up there, the power brokers up there, they had briefings that told them what the deal was. And they won't dare allow that to come out under subpoena. Kubik says if they don't have strong subpoena power, if they don't have the ability to do long-term cross-examination, it won't work. And that's exactly the point, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly the point I made to you just a moment ago. If they cannot sit there and get a witness up on that stand, and they're limited to 5 minutes, and they're limited to interruptions by, people who are sitting there trying to support it, like that stupid piece of trash there who was trying to interrupt the hearings with Lois Lerner, only for us to find out that he was guilty and involved in it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an act of treason. The Citizens Committee on Benghazi. You can go and find the information out yourself. You can go to aim.org. That's aim, like aim a gun.org. And then look up Benghazi. It's the Citizens Commission on Benghazi. You see, and you can find the article from Daily Mail on our website, on our Facebook page, and I'll link it in the bottom of this YouTube article, or this YouTube session. Make sure that you read it and you understand and see it yourself. Because I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a blatant, open act of treason. This government is guilty. The Obama administration is guilty. The senior executive cabinet members knew. The Pentagon knew. The Department of State knew. And who was in charge of the Department of State? Hillary Rodham Clinton. And the senior level members of Congress who sat on these select subcommittees that are entitled to all of the information that's going on, they all knew. That should cause every American to say, we've had enough. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Louisiana Citizen Database that is being created to identify people who are a, quote, risk to the state. What more do you need as an American citizen to recognize that you are being enslaved as we speak? Stick with us. We'll be right back. If you're catching us live on America's Voice Now, stick with us for a moment. I'm going to read a couple of local commercials for our folks and our sponsors. We'll be right back. Folks, if you are listening to us on any of our programs, please make sure that you support and help our sponsors out. These are the folks that keep this program on the air. And I'd like you to make sure that you patronize their businesses because they put up their money and put it where their mouth is, which, frankly, nobody else seems to be willing to do except a few listeners like you. Pizza Hut over on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. If you're in West Plains, swing by them on Porter Wagoner Boulevard and make sure Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that would be today, they have a reduced price lunch. And it's their lunch buffet, which has a salad bar and pizza bar and all kinds of stuff, a pasta bar and so forth. Swing by there. It's only $5, and take advantage of that. They're on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. While you're there, mention to your server or the owner or the manager there that you are a listener from America's Voice Now and you heard their ad there. Jason Henry, the law offices of Jason Henry. Here's an attorney who I know and I've used personally, and the guy works. He does a great job. He is especially talented at criminal and federal and state criminal cases. If you've got a family member who's in jail and been incarcerated, you're looking for some kind of appeal help, this is the guy. Give him a call. I've seen him do some stunning work. 417-256-4100. He also handles local cases about DUIs and stuff like that. State and federal criminal cases, and he specializes in gun cases. Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop on the square in West Plains, 417-257-1776. Anything and everything for cigars and tobacco, pipes, every accessory that you could be interested in smoking. And then Wits End Classic Barbershop. Get your hair cut over there for 10 measly bucks. Does a great job, cuts my hair about once a week. Swing by there and ask for Jason at Wits End Classic Barbershop. If you get a chance, visit our friends at West Plains Rental and Supply, 417-256-0017. 256-0017. They've got anything and everything from backhoes all the way down to pressure washers, floor sanders, drills, hammers, anything you could need to rent, they've got it. Last but not least, survivalbypreparedness.com. Make sure that you swing over to that website. They ship natural grass-fed beef all over the country. Can't beat it. We'll be right back. segment of the day. Today's Thursday, the 24th. Glad to have you with us. Boy, I know some of this stuff is controversial, but you know what? Nobody else in media is talking about it, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody. Where are the other mainstream radio hosts who are exposing this stuff? Nobody. I'm one guy. I'm a flea on the elephant's butt. I know that I've got this, tiny audience of dedicated folks who work tirelessly to try to help and share and spread these videos so that other people can see them and be awakened and aware of what's happening around us. I got to tell you, it's a tough place to be, guys. Mainstream media, the Ministry of Propaganda, is decidedly doing anything and everything in their power to keep this kind of information from you. I know I'm not real polished. I'm not Sean Hannity. I'm not Rush Limbaugh. I'm not Glenn Beck. I don't have all this fancy gear and equipment. Our listenership paid for everything that we've got. I pay every month for the fees to keep this show on the air, with the limitation of some sponsors who keep us on a local radio station. I mean, guys, where is America when, this topic for this show is going to be the Louisiana Citizen Database of people who are, quote, you ain't going to believe this one. This is a Louisiana database that was originally allegedly created to detect fraud, but it's to identify people, quote, who are a risk to the state down the road upon information that we know about, based on information we know about the individual, end quote. It enables authorities to quickly identify an individual who is going to be at risk of incarceration down the road. What? That's exactly what I said. This guy is a Louisiana state representative in this video. What he did was he was talking about, and he was running basically an ad for the benefit of this issue in Louisiana, where this is a company that does big data. And I don't think, quite frankly, he understood what he was saying and that it was going to be picked up and listened to and understood by the American people and recognized for what it is. This is an information hub that is intended to detect potential future criminals and allow government to, quote, intervene in their lives. That's their words, not mine. When you hear this video, it's only 3 minutes. Stick with it, stick with us, and make sure that you participate here. But when you hear this, it's going to blow the top of your head off. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the risks that we have under the National Security Agency, the FBI, the database that they're putting together based on Obamacare, Department of Homeland Security. Every state is cooperating. Every state is assisting. Every agency. They are furiously at work trying to gather facial recognition. The federal government now openly admits that they're doing that. I got to tell you, folks, this is stuff that is so far over the top. I cannot believe that Americans are standing around and we are not storming the castles, literally. I mean, what is it going to take, folks? What is it going to take?
Well, originally what we were facing was...
This guy, his name is Representative Chris Broadwater from the Louisiana House of Representatives. I believe he's a Republican, I might add, which ought to tell you everything that you know about this upcoming election. Every damned Republican out there has been supportive of the NSA and all of this spying and surveillance crap. These people are traitors to you personally.
There's a problem with fraud, specifically in workers' compensation and unemployment insurance. Well, initially, in order to respond to workers' compensation unemployment fraud, we were looking at the SAS fraud framework to provide those analytics. But
listen now.
When we built our system, we decided instead of providing an agency-specific solution, that we would instead create a centralized data warehouse.
All right, there it comes. But while we were at it, we decided we were going to create the centralized data warehouse. and we were going to get every state agency to put data into the system. When you hear in the next 2 minutes what the plan is, it's going to blow the top of your head off.
Applying the SAS fraud framework there and allow every agency within state government to operate like a hub and spoke type system where they would.
So every agency within the state, every agency would pour information in and have access to draw information out about all the people that are in the database. Those people are the citizens of Louisiana.
Would all send in their data. By the centralized data warehouse getting data from those multiple sources, it would allow each participating agency who was seeking to detect fraud within their agency to create that comprehensive person profile and look for anomalies.
A comprehensive person profile. You know, what you don't... We hear Muslims saying you can't profile. We hear blacks saying you can't profile. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the same crap that we went through in the 14th Amendment. We didn't free the slaves in the 14th Amendment. We enslaved everyone in the country. This is the same thing. They're not profiling blacks. They're not profiling Hispanics. They're not profiling gays. They're not profiling Islamics. They're not profiling any. They're profiling everybody, irrespective of what other demographic you may fit into. This is, you know what? The citizens of Louisiana should be storming this in mass, finding out where that data sits, and destroying the computers. I mean, this is unconscionable behavior.
The beauty to me behind the solution that SAS provided.
The beauty to him behind the solution, right? This is a commercial for the company that does the business for him. The beauty behind this, the magic behind the wizard behind the curtain that enables us to know everything about you. Wait until you hear what they're talking about doing. When you show up to go get your welfare check, they know the names of all your kids, and wait until you hear this. This is going to blow your mind.
Was that they were able to take a state that was data rich and solution poor and compile, aggregate all of that data into a single location so that we could then have multiple applications that were available.
So they've got all of your information in a centralized location, and they're now going to use it for reasons that they haven't told you what they are yet, right? So the game plan here is they've got multiple reasons or multiple things that they're going to use this for, but they're not telling you what those are.
Ultimately, my hope would be that we reach a point in state government to where we can take all of the information we have, create that comprehensive person profile so it makes the lives of our citizens better.
There's that word again, that phrase again, comprehensive person profile.
If they walk into the Department of Motor Vehicles to renew their driver's license, the individual, the state worker, can bring up the screen that automatically populates with your information to complete that application.
Okay, listen to this again. I want you to listen carefully. When you go to motor vehicle, the state employee automatically, your file pops up and it pre-populates all the forms, your name, your address, your date of birth, your social security number, the number of kids in your household, the number of people who live with you, whether you paid your taxes or not, did you pay your county tax, so they're free to give you your registration on your motor vehicle. This is so flippin' Orwellian, America, I can't stand it.
Walk into the Department of Motor Vehicles to renew their driver's license. The individual, the state worker, can bring up the screen that automatically populates with your information to complete that application. But not only does it do that, but may also alert that individual that their child may be eligible for the state health insurance program that may enable that child to get treatment at an early age for something that could turn into a very costly disease later that will cost the state lots of dollars. If we could be proactive from that aspect, use the analytics to identify where there is a risk to the state down the road based upon the information we know on the individual.
So the goal is to identify what the risks are to the state. Not to really help you, because the truth is they really don't give a damn about you. You know, they're playing this happy little music in the background. This is a commercial. They're playing this happy little music in the background like it's a down-homey thing, And everybody's supposed to be so happy that when you walk in, the facial recognition camera recognizes you, and before you even get up to the counter, your file is in front of the happy little lady who's the dowdy little state worker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your future. If you think it's going to be so beneficent, you have been completely indoctrinated by the Kool-Aid.
Whether it's saving money in healthcare costs or quickly identifying an individual who is going to be at risk for incarceration.
There you go. Whether it's going to save the state money in healthcare or if it's to identify an individual who's going to be at risk of incarceration down the road. What? Do you understand the implications of that? Really?
Going to be at risk for incarceration down the road.
I mean, you've got to be kidding me. We're now determining in advance
if we could intervene in that person's life.
If we can intervene in that person's life. If we can intervene in that person's life. The Republican member of the Louisiana House of Representatives, Chris Broadwater, District 86, doing a commercial for the big data company that's gathering and collecting all the information about you, set up to combat fraudulent worker compensation and unemployment insurance claims. They've now migrated and morphed this through mission creep into an Orwellian database that makes 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 look like they've been merged into one. Not to mention the Minority Report with pre-crime. You know, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. This is only the beginning and the tip of the iceberg to the treason that is being accomplished and injected into our society every single moment. You are all sitting here allowing this to be done to us because America won't stand up as a unified group, lock our elbows and said, we've had enough. The truth is, this is terrorism. Because irrespective of the happy music in the background, irrespective of, well, okay, let's use their definition. Let me explain to you how it's terrorism. In the Patriot Act, now they, of course, their argument will be, well, that doesn't count, you can't count government in those guilty of these acts that would qualify as terrorism. Really? Why are you exempted? Because you wrote it? In Section 802 of the USA Patriot Act, they expanded the definition of terrorism to include the new term domestic terrorist, as opposed to international terrorism. And here's how they define it. A person engages in domestic terrorism if they do an act dangerous to human life that is a violation of the criminal laws of a state or the United States. Or if the act appears intended to, and here's where it gets applicable, 1, intimidate or coerce a civilian population. The guy's guilty. The state's guilty. The federal government's guilty. The NSA's guilty. The FBI's guilty. Every agency is guilty. The EPA, the BLM, the USDA, the FTC, the FCC, the FAA. Need I go on? Guilty of an act of domestic terrorism if the act appears or is intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. 2, influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion. Is that not what all of this bribe money coming from the federal government to the states to subvert and betray your Fourth Amendment rights is all about? Is that not part of it, ladies and gentlemen? Ask yourself. The federal government is pumping billions, hundreds of billions of dollars into the states. $5 billion to intimidate or coerce and influence the policy of government by intimidation and coercion. What is coercion? Coercion is, I'm going to give you this money, and if you don't do it, I'm going to take the money away. That's coercion. Now, here's $5 billion, implement Common Core. Oh, you're not going to do that? We're going to pull your school funds. Coercion intended to influence the policy of a government. Guys, this isn't, you don't have to be a lawyer to figure this out. You can use their own words against them. And utilizing their own definition, these acts have to occur within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, and if they don't, they'll be regarded as international terrorism. Everything that you just heard in that video was designed to intimidate or coerce. You can apply the term coercion to his example. When you walk into motor vehicle, up pops your file. And the girl at motor vehicle, who's happily sitting there in the video smiling as if, all is well, the sun is shining, the birds are singing, the clouds are scuttling across the earth, and we all have full tummies, and the world is so wonderful, and you're so happy to pay that $87 to register a car you've bought and owned for 12 years. And up pops your file, and she looks at it and she says, Mr. Jones, I'm so happy to see you. How's Mrs. Jones? I know you're married. It says right here, and it tells me your wife's name. And I see her birthday was yesterday. Tell her happy birthday for me. And by the way, I see you have little Johnny and little Susie and little Stevie. And I see that little Stevie hasn't had all of his shots. And he's about to enter school. You do realize that, of course, little Stevie is eligible for the free clinic service. And, of course, he will not be able to join or go to the school without all of his shots. And you, like an idiot, say, well, we don't believe in immunization. Oh, there goes the flag. She puts a checkbox next to the thing that says non-compliant with immunization records. You go to bring the kid to school on the first day, and you're told at gunpoint, sorry, he's not allowed in. Then you get a visit from DYFUS, who says, you must not be good parents if you won't get little Stevie his shots. You see, you're an individual who is going to be at risk of incarceration down the road. And you are a risk to the state down the road, based on the information we know about you as an individual. Their words, not mine. And I also notice, while you're here, Mr. Jones, that you have been purchasing an enormous amount of guns lately. I mean, I see that you purchased a pistol, and I see that you purchased 2 rifles. I mean, I'm just curious, why do you feel that you have the need to have firearms? And are they locked up so that little Stevie and Johnny and Susie can't gain access to them? Well, that's really none of your business. Oh, I better put a check next to his name that he's belligerent, and he's clearly antisocial. He refuses to answer the questions. The next thing you know, you receive a knock on the door from your local police department. We're just here to check up and make sure that Stevie and Susie and Johnny are okay, because it's our understanding that there are firearms in the house. And we see that 22 years ago, you had an arrest for marijuana. And we're deeply concerned about the safety of the children. May we come in? Ladies and gentlemen, are you not seeing the obvious? Your boss gets a phone call. How's Mr. Jones doing at work? He's showing up on time? I mean, our database shows that he works for you. Because we're trying to identify and detect fraud. Has he ever done anything that would raise you to question him? Does he seem depressed? Is it possible he's a threat to himself or others? I mean, you are his immediate supervisor. We want to make sure that he's not filing any fraudulent workers' compensation and unemployment insurance claims. That's where we have the information, of course. It allows us to create this centralized data warehouse that, of course, you submit to. Every agency within state government submits. And it's to detect fraud and identify people who are at risk, who are a risk to the state down the road, based upon the information we have about that individual. So we're just trying to be proactive about Mr. Jones because we have deep concerns. Well, we can't discuss those concerns with you because it's an investigation that's currently underway. And as you can well imagine, you wouldn't want us to discuss your personal information based purely on an investigation. So you'll understand why we won't want to talk about Mr. Jones' personal investigation. So we're just here to ask you questions, and we'd like you to answer them. Does he seem depressed? Has he been missing work lately? See, the goal here is for us to find those people who are a risk to the state down the road based upon the information we know about the individual. Why do I keep repeating that phrase? Because it's their phrase! And we as authorities are enabled to quickly identify, quote, an individual who's going to be at risk of incarceration down the road. No, we're not saying that Mr. Jones is a criminal. We're just saying that he would be a higher risk than you, perhaps, sir. But if you're unwilling to provide the information from us and cooperate, perhaps we'll pull your file and maybe open an investigation into why you are so uncooperative, Mr. Employer. Because, after all, our goal here is to identify individuals who are going to be at risk of incarceration down the road. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for you to make a decision and stand your ground, to stand on your feet, to arise, be fierce, to stand up and be fearless, to be courageous, and to speak out and fight back actively, even when your voice and your hands shake with fear. When the government fears the people, there is freedom and liberty. When people fear their government, there is tyranny. Those were words from Jefferson 250 years ago. You've heard me say it before. We live in a police state. And the mainstream media is doing everything in their power to keep you calm, to keep you sedated, to keep you numb, to make you apathetic, confused, disinterested, misdirected. They use propaganda. They use your own addictions against you. They love the idea of an America completely ensconced in marijuana smoke. Not because they really care about you or your health. They just want you numb. Numb and apathetic. Do you smoke pot? I couldn't care less. I'm just telling you that if you do, that's exactly what it does. Makes you numb and apathetic. All of you Occupy Wall Streets, Occupy D.C., you're falling right into their trap. You are the mouse who's biting upon the cheese. And it's not you that's going to lose your freedom and your life. It's going to be you, your significant other, your children, your children's children, for generations to come, until someone, somewhere, has the courage to stand and say, no more. Why don't we have that courage? You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your distraught and unhappy host. You can contact us. You can send me email directly to mike@americasvoicenow.org. Please support our efforts to awaken, alert. Think of it as supporting Paul Revere. That's what this is really about.